Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making an impact, empowering the good in our community as well as around the globe. Did you know that over half of the children in the US have a physical or mental health issue? And what I've learned today by listening to Dr. Roseann's podcast is that that's 10-year-old data. So imagine what it is now. Today, we're learning more about ADHD or pandemic fog brain. What is it? With a mental health trailblazer who is changing the way we view and treat children's mental health by teaching how to calm the brain in order to have a happy and calm family. Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge, thank you for joining us again on the City Current Show.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. And I know you have amazing listeners who are out there taking life by storm and also trying to really live a more balanced life. And so these conversations about mental health help every facet of your life. So I'm grateful to be able to be here to talk to everybody.
Absolutely. And we had a long conversation even before we started recording. As a father of 3 little ones, I know how important this conversation is today. But before we dive into the root causes of maybe pandemic brain fog or ADHD and children's behavioral health, give listeners a glimpse at your background and your expertise.
Yeah, well, this is my third decade in mental health, and I really specialize in working with kids and families, and really kids that have clinical mental health issues like ADHD, OCD, anxiety, depression, PANDAS, and other issues. And during this time, Andrew, I have always been an integrative practitioner. So what I do is I use science-backed solutions that are natural to really calm the brain and help families get back and hopefully maybe even be better than they were before these crises started to happen. But what I am really seeing during this pandemic is really intense issues, complex issues. And I do talks like this. I have my own podcast, my book, It's Going to Be Okay, and a Facebook group, Natural Parenting Solutions. I'm doing all of this so that people don't have to go down the rabbit hole looking for help and really getting accurate information, right? So I'm a huge fan. You heard me talk before. I love podcasts. I listen all the time. I'm practically Google MD myself. And what I want is people to have a trusted source. And that's me. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked with tens of thousands of people, and I've helped them get their lives back, help kids feel really good about themselves. And that is what all of my work is about practical solutions, actionable steps, and to really restore calm within a person's brain, but within a whole family unit, because things are not where we should be in America, and we can do better, and we're making it way, way harder than it should be.
Amen. And that's why we loved having you on the City Current Show before. You discussed the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health. And for those who haven't watched or listened to the episode, I encourage you to check it out on citycurrent.com. But give a quick glimpse at the Global Institute. And then what you just recently said was launching your podcast, It's Going to Be Okay. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I have Dr. Roseann LLC, where I work with people one-on-one all over the world. But I also started in January of 2020, the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health, because I was seeing the need across the globe for people to have support. And yes, sometimes we can do things on our own, but we should always use trusted sources, and also to really develop things like books and programs that are accessible to people. And that's what I'm doing. And part of that is my podcast, It's Going to Be Okay. And I wanted that to be the parenting resource for children's behavior and mental health. And my podcast is just started, but we have an episode going out every day. So there'll be lots of episodes for you to binge listen to. And they're short episodes. Most of them are under 15 minutes. And they really are deep dives into practical solutions, different science-backed natural treatments. And I want people to have accurate information about clinical conditions, as well as what can actually change the brain and behavior. And that's what this whole podcast is about. So it's been awesome. It's been well received. And I already like have thousands of downloads in week 2. So I'm pretty excited. And I'm wanted to be a lifeline for parents because, we were talking before, when you have kids, you rattle around in your own head. And sometimes you ask for help and you're like, that is not the answer. And, and if it's a pediatrician or a teacher, you might do what they say, even though your mama or papa gut says, danger, danger, no. And we're like, but I asked and they said everything was okay. And maybe I should ignore it. And, if your gut says something is wrong, there's nothing wrong with taking action. Nobody ever regrets getting help. They only regret when they don't. And that is what I'm seeing a lot of. And I want to stop that. And by putting out real information, and, I may have a doctorate, but, this is how I talk. And I talk, little kids train me to explain big concepts. And I'm so grateful because I literally will get down, Andrew, like on the floor and explain the brain to a 2 or 3 year old. So everything makes sense. And it's really, I want to talk about real solutions to real problems because people need help. And that's what all of my work is about.
And that's once again, what I love about you and your work is that it's in layman's terms. It's relatable to any parent or inspiring parent or grandparent that wants to know about, or child that wants to know about some of the problems they may be facing or whatnot. And speaking of one of the biggest problems that we've all faced over the last 3 years was the COVID-19 pandemic. And there have been some long-term impacts that you've noticed starting to see in children in particular. So let's talk about that, what some of those impacts you're seeing for kids in the US, and then maybe some other things that they're struggling with.
Yeah, well, we know through survey research, Andrew, that we're seeing a huge uptick in all clinical conditions, anxiety, depression, OCD, as well as suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. We are seeing a huge uptick in hospital psychiatric admissions, as well as ER visits for behavior. We also know that before the pandemic, 50% of all police calls are related to mental health. And an increase in psychiatric medication. So even though we have a huge increase in psychiatric medication, we also have a major increase in mental health problems. So we're not seeing increased psychiatric use, decreased mental health issues. We're in fact seeing them all rise. And so those are some of the biggest things that we're seeing, as well as, I think, for me, and what we're going to talk about is it ADHD or is it pandemic brain fog? And adults are calling me. I'm getting parents bringing their kids in, and they're all wondering, what is this? I can't concentrate. I, really can't get anything done. I'm really struggling, yet I'm tired all the time. And it's a conversation I'm having nearly almost every day with people. So I think that that is probably one of the biggest things that I'm seeing in and of itself, besides the rise in clinical issues.
That's really fascinating, because I love when you're talking about when you look at the research and you see that there's an increase in psychiatric drugs, and there's an increase in still behavior of kids that are some mental health and behavioral health issues, and you go, okay, yeah, there should be an increase in one and decrease in another, but if
That's right.
Increased, there's a huge issue out there. So what are some of those aha moments, red flags that you see when it compares to ADHD versus pandemic brain fog?
Yeah. So first of all, when it's ADHD, right, it's a clinical condition. You're going to have issues with inattention, hyperactivity, distractibility, impulse control, and they're going to have been there before age 12. And it doesn't mean you had a clinical diagnosis, but what it might mean, and just so we also know, people with ADHD, as well as dyslexia have a higher IQ than average. So these tend to be brighter people in general. When you're brighter, you can compensate. So you can pretend, you can memorize things. You also can, if you missed the first 3 seconds of something, you might be smart enough to have background information to kind of flub it, right? So we have to have had a history of something. So, oh yeah, I remember, every March his teacher would call and like clockwork and the grades would go down, right? So there's patterns, there's behaviors that emerge that again, maybe don't have a clinical history. So we look at that first, right? When did it really start? Not your diagnosis, but when did those symptoms start? And a really good professional who knows ADHD can dive into that. Is your regular physician gonna get in there? Probably not. If most of us took an ADHD checklist, if you're lucky to get one of those, it doesn't tell you why it's happening. It just says, I'm experiencing this. So what we also need to do is look at what else is going on. Like right before I came in here, one of our old clients called, and once people work with us, we do neurofeedback, we do coaching and counseling, we do PEMF, we do a lot of brain treatments, and then we help you with the behaviors. We don't typically get anybody ever coming back. So what had happened was he was getting sick and got COVID, and now he's really struggling with focus. So we have to look at what else is going on. Is this actual COVID brain fog? Is this brain fog from fatigue? Is this anxiety and depression? So many things can interfere with your focus. And I'm going to tell you that anecdotally, I don't have research for this, but 50% of the time when somebody comes to me and says, I've got ADHD, it's actually something else. So, and it could be that long list of other things. So brain fog, right? And ADHD looks different. So ADHD, most people think you can never focus. That's just not the truth. You actually can hyper focus. You can focus amazing when it's your preferred area, when you have a high interest in something, right? So you love video editing and you got ADHD, you can't, like a fire could be happening and you can't break their attention. But you ask them to put the dishes away because they hate doing that. It's like, you could pay them $1 million and they can't do it in the same way. So the brain has an understimulated and overstimulated component. And when they like something, they can really lock in on it. When it's brain fog, you're going to feel a general fog, like, I just don't feel right. Like it's like staying up really late and, or you had a bad night of sleep and the rest of the day, you're just sluggish in your processing. That's not the case with ADHD. There's more of an up and down that's related to the task, right? So that's a big giveaway between the two. And, again, brain fog can occur and lack of focus can occur for a variety of reasons. It could be anxiety. You can have a learning disability. Many people with learning disabilities are misdiagnosed with an ADHD when really they have a learning and processing problem. And, when something persists, whether it's brain fog or it's ADHD, you want to find a professional and you want to get some help. If you lean more towards brain fog and you just had COVID, find a functional physician, find somebody who really can say, hey, I'm still experiencing long hauls. That's a long hauler symptom. And I need support, right? And there's lots of things you can do. You can do things for the immune system. You can help detoxify the virus out of your system. And these are things that we're learning about long haulers, which about 1/3 of people experience after COVID.
I was thinking about when you're talking about hyper focusing with ADHD, I'm thinking, oh, wow, my wife's probably going to listen to this and think he probably has ADHD. And for sometimes we talk about like, oh, well, maybe your priority isn't straight. Maybe you're just because you're super hyper focused on something else and not the other. For kids growing up, you think, oh, well, you are hyper focused on.
You're just not putting enough effort. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the brain, it's like I try to remove the personal part, right? Like, so like, kids get shamed, adults get shamed. We have to look at everything from the brain, right? So it doesn't mean we use it as an excuse. No, in fact, quite the opposite. We use it to optimize what we're doing. So if our brain is prone to, like if you try to put algebra in front of me, I'm like going to be like, get away, right?
Yes.
Like I can't do it. I don't know how I did it. I barely made it. And thank God I did awesome at statistics. But you want to talk to me about the brain. You want to put a cranky 3-year-old with me, bring them on. Like I love it. You know what I mean? But somebody else, that might not be their jam. But I don't have ADD. And if I did, I've corrected it with neurofeedback, so we can't tell. But when your brain is understimulated naturally and in a certain region related to a certain task, it's just naturally going to be harder. And, as we evolve as adults, right, we know what our jam is, right? And like in our house, I mean, you have, I don't know how long you've been married, Andrew, but, this is year 20, this is going into year 28. And we basically we call each other, we're Team Hodge in our family. Like I do certain things and he does certain things. And we like, he's like, please don't fold the laundry, Roseann. I'm like, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But, like, and you just kind of conquer and divide, and we sort of honor each other and what our strengths are. Yes, there are times we both have to do things that are harder for us. But when it comes to the real world, your job, right, in your marriage, your relationships, your job as a student in school, there are many times we really have to stretch ourselves and we have to say, what is the brain really capable of? And when you still have to do something, right? I had to get through algebra. We won't really talk about on tape how I got through algebra, but I did. And but thank you, 1980s. And but when you do, you find a way, right? If you're gonna be successful, you find a way. And hopefully, I think it's just so much harder, Andrew, today. Like when you're a kid in school, the school load, the work is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. My 12-year-old sixth grader in a Montessori school is doing a full-on research paper. He got to choose suspension bridges, which is awesome. And so he's writing a 5-page paper. He's doing a PowerPoint presentation on it, sixth grade. I didn't do stuff like that until high school.
No, me either.
So he's so smart. He just like used his little voice dictation on his Google Chrome thing, and he did it.
See, that's the use of technology too, which also makes me think that, we are expecting more out of our children because of the technology advances, but that also doesn't mean that just because technology advanced that we should shove more into what we're doing and overloading our brain with all these different functions to just really make ourselves even more tired than we might be with traditional brain fog. So,
well, and that's a great point, right? So our brain has to power down to power up. And so, I mean, gosh knows, I love my new 14 with the 1 terabyte. My kids were like, Mom, you need a terabyte. And I was like, oh, I do.
yes.
And I didn't, but I do a lot of videos though. They're like, oh, you need it for your videos, Mom. I'm like, okay. So, but you don't have, I mean, I've learned to really put my do not disturb on, because your brain, even if it's physically near you, will alert that you should look at it. Right. So we need to have downtime for our brain. Otherwise it feels cluttered. And it's a matter of setting it up as a routine. And it becomes really hard because, 20 years ago, your boss didn't contact you at 6 o'clock at night. But now it's sort of like a standard, right? And you have to have access, right? So I think one of the things too, as an adult, is like, don't respond to things right away. Like, if you don't have to respond, give yourself, times. Like, these are those brain hacks. Like, I have friends that only answer emails at 9, 12, and 3, so that they keep it together. I batch. So On Fridays, I do my own podcast. I do other people's podcasts. I don't typically see patients on Fridays. Like, I try to keep my mind clear for the same topics. So there are things we can do, and our kids can be the same. If our kid is going from device to device, and they're not really spending time off devices. And I'm not against devices. Like, but I'm against what you lose when you're only on a device, right? So that's play, real play,
Real play.
Board games. I don't know if there's any kids in the neighborhood, but maybe kids in the neighborhood. And
they're all online talking to each other.
Totally, absolutely. But doing different things, having tactile experiences, because that is important, right? Reading books.
Yeah.
Not on a device. I don't read books on device, but I do definitely listen to audiobooks. I'm crazy for audio, but I love to listen, So we have to think about what else are we doing, and we have to give ourselves. And I think that's what happened in the pandemic, Andrew, is like they were homeschooling, they were working from home, and I'm not sure how many people physically recovered from it. Maybe you need to do a digital detox, do a 30-day cleanse on a diet, get yourself back on track. And certainly exercise of every age, at every age is in any way, shape, or form is essential. Even if it's 10 minutes of stretching a day, is really, really important for brain health to help you feel more focused.
I love that, mentioning the digital detox. We had a speaker a number of years ago at City Current, Daniel Seberg, who worked at Google at the time, ironically, and he wrote a book called The Digital Diet, and it really changed the way that I was, because, personally and professionally, being so focused in the digital media realm, knowing that I need to take some time away. And of course, I've strained way off that path. But as a new year has recently approached, we've got some resolutions in store for that. But before we change from sort of the ADHD versus brain fog conversation, what are some natural therapies, remedies that you would suggest to help kids and teens reduce and reverse some of those ADHD symptoms?
Yeah. And, I talk a lot about this, on my podcast and my natural parenting solutions group, but, there are some simple things that we all can do. And I mentioned exercise. So we know through research that as little as 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 times a week of moderate exercise reduces symptoms of ADHD by 40%. So getting out and moving in some way, shape, or form. And I love when families do it together, because I'm a working mom. I got 2 kids, and, it's hard, so you squeezing it in and together, it gets you, connection. It's very, very helpful. And I think that's certainly a starting point. And obviously diet, right? Nobody wants to change their diet, but most kids with ADHD are not getting enough protein and healthy fat. And just shifting that can really make a huge difference. So, my house, we're gluten-free and dairy-free and very, very low sugar. My kids love our food. Everybody loves our food. I mean, I'm a great cook. That's what I love to do. It's my passion. It's my de-stressor. And anybody comes over, I'm like, you're getting a 5-star meal. It's just the way it is, right? But it doesn't have to be that extreme. You just have to have a lot of spices on your food. I don't mean spices, but you got to use, it's not spicy food unless you want it, but using garlic and pepper and getting your kids involved in cooking can expand their palate and make you all healthier. So protein and fat, really essential, and start swapping out for healthy alternatives. It makes a huge difference. When you're only doing carbs, you're going to crash and burn. So, obviously if cost is a consideration, shop on sale. Look at your local grocery store, compare it against the big box places, and buy in bulk when it's on sale. I mean, that's just what you do. I mean, it's very, very helpful to do that. And certainly supplements. Supplements are my number one blog is supplements for ADHD, 9 supplements for ADHD. It's my number one YouTube video too. And there are so many things because we have genetics with ADHD, we have genetic mutations. There are certain things that happen within the body that make nutrients less accessible. It's particularly the B vitamins. And I would say the number one vitamin that basically everybody should take, you always want to check with your, doctor, is magnesium. It's safe and it helps us sleep better. We take it at night. It helps with anxiety, clinically shown anxiety, depression, ADHD, pain. I don't know what it's not good for, to be honest, Andrew. And so taking magnesium for the sleep and helping our brain, really be optimal is important. It is the number one most used nutrient in the body, and 300 chemical, it's a cofactor in 300 processes in the body. And we're so stressed out, we just can't get enough of it. I mean, even if you had a very magnesium rich diet, you're just not going to get enough magnesium. So it's really important to take.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because it brought up an idea in my head that I talked to. One of my friends owns a health and wellness supplement wholesale store in our area, and they have like hundreds of thousands of supplements, health and wellness supplements. And I was helping her with a social media project, and she was talking to me about magnesium and the benefits. And she said that people come in and she'll, guide them to, here's some of the benefits of magnesium. And they're like, okay, I'll try it. And they come back and they're like, I have to get more, and I have to tell my friends and my family.
I know.
It's like, what? It's like all these things. And that's what I love about being so close. They're right down the road from me. And I was actually this morning getting a smoothie. And I love that when you talk about supplements, they are, for many cases, natural supplements that you can take that your body is just needing of, that have been around for thousands of years, and you don't have to be on some prescription.
Absolutely.
And able to really hone in on what your body needs.
Absolutely. And, and magnesium is one of those things. It really is like, the first day I took it, I noticed a difference, right? So you can see an immediate effect, which is kind of cool, because some of the other stuff, especially are fat soluble, like vitamin D or A, you might not notice it right away. And so and generally it's safe. The thing you have to worry about with magnesium, you obviously read your label, is you take it to bowel tolerance. So some people, when they take too much magnesium, it can loosen your stools. So you start out really small, but it's a safe vitamin that we are really needing in this busy world. And, let's face it, most kids, they're not eating a variety of foods. They're not getting enough protein. If you're not being very conscious about the nutrients your kids are getting, right? It's my cultural upbringing to be concerned about food as a first generation American, and my parents, like I grew up, we had 2 or 3 vegetables at every meal. Like that's not what most people think about with Italians, but real Italians eat a lot of verdure. They eat a lot of greens, they eat a lot of vegetables. And my kids are the same. Before I left today, I chopped up all these peppers. I'm making a pepper salad. My kids are like, "Oh, we're having a pepper salad." Like, they appreciate it. It's good stuff. So again, it has the right spices. I put capers and lots of garlic in it. It's yummy. So Mr. Hodge doesn't like capers, but tough nookies. The rest of us do.
Where can people go to learn more about you, subscribe to the podcast, learn about your services, purchase your book?
You can go really easily to drroseann.com, and it's DRROSEANN.com, and it's / for podcast. You can't miss it. And also you can also see community right on the homepage. So if you're interested in getting free resources, they're there. If you're interested in working with us one-on-one, we only take a small amount of people at a time. And people often, I have somebody from the South right now who's with us for 2 weeks. But sometimes they don't come up. We just work straight virtual with them. But, this is important. If you're concerned about your own mental wellness or your child's, take action. Take some action. And if it's doing it on your own, stick with it for at least 30 days before you decide it's not working. And if you want professional help, find a provider. It's really important. Nobody ever regrets getting help. They only regret when they don't.
Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge, thank you so much for coming on the City Current Show, sharing your wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate everything that you do to power the good and to help children thrive.